Hi, it's Tom Johnson at Hirobe. Welcome to our video series. Today we're joined by Tad Reeves, a AEM architect focusing on the infrastructure and DevOps space. I invited Tad to have a quick chat with us following a podcast or video that I watched of Tad covering AEM as a cloud service. It was a really interesting piece towards the end of that, which covered off a various question that led us into people before process. But ultimately, I wanted to chat to Tad around a couple of points of AEM as a cloud service and what that means for people and people's teams, and go from there really. So Tad, great to have you.
You as well.
So I suppose we had a brief chat before and there was a couple of questions we wanted to cover off, but we'll get the initial ones done, starting and then see where that takes us. Okay. But I think the first question that we had, and for a little bit of context, I will share your original video. I'll put that in the link wherever this is posted, and we'll make sure that that's there as well for that context. But ultimately, this came from a question, I think it was around what would be your first question to a company that was thinking to go with AEM as a cloud service. And it was a little bit challenging for you, and you went at it a little bit of a different way. That was people before process. But the first question really is, should every AEM environment be in the cloud?
Well, so my answer to that is no, not everything should be in the cloud. And because AEM is not, it's not like, Zoom. Like we're recording this on Zoom right now. It's not like a service that basically serves a single purpose and is used in an analogous way on every use case. It's not like that. It's a big set of tools that and frameworks and things that can be done that are employed in widely different ways by widely different companies doing widely different things, and they all have different requirements. They all have different audiences. They all have different volumes of people who are trying to hit it. They all have times. They have places in the world that they're trying to hit this from. They have things that they're trying to connect to. They have things that they're not trying to connect to. They have all these. There's so many different requirements that there would be no way to say everything should be done in this one way.
Yep.
Now, obviously, it behooves people like implementers like myself and the vendor. It obviously behooves Adobe to try to limit the number of ways that you try to get something done, because that makes the product easier to develop and makes it easier to integrate when you're not having people do things a million different ways. But at the end of the day, there's a million different things that it's going to get done. And there's a huge difference between somebody who is utilizing AEM, utilizing their AEM platform as an internal intranet that only has a private audience, that has people authenticating via an internal SSO to be able to use it. And then you have somebody who's using it as a commerce platform, and they're maybe using it as a headless commerce platform, or maybe they're using it as a headless content platform, or maybe you've got a big whatever cooking news site or something like that, and you've just got just tons and tons of video content, or you're only using it for assets. There's tons of different use cases, and so there's no one answer to that then as to everything should be hosted in this one way and should be executed in this one way, and never mind things like financial services companies or something like that have they all have stringent security requirements, but they have vastly different stringent security requirements. So if you take the difference between an American bank, a British bank, and a Swiss bank, they all have they all have really stringent security requirements, but they all go about it in completely different ways. Some of them say, oh yeah, we can host in the cloud any way you want, except for we can't, and here's the list of things that you can't.
Yeah.
And then you ask the same question of your Swiss bank, and they're like, oh yeah, we can host anywhere you want as long as it's Switzerland. Like, and then the requirements are so different that that it really is a trick to be able to get down to the bottom of what really are the requirements, which ones are negotiable and which ones are not, which ones stem from the business idea or the real goal that the thing that the great hope that this site is supposed to execute for the business. Because in a lot of cases, the reason why there's so much development in the AEM space is because a lot of times the site that Adobe Experience Manager is driving in that company really is the great hope of the future for the company. It's the thing that's supposed to bring in the customers that's the lifeblood of the company, or something like that. A lot of times it is a marketing site, and so you got to just kind of try to work around those requirements. And like, what are you really after? What are the things that you're super trying to do? And sometimes kind of, sometimes you have to work with it as a hard requirement, and sometimes you kind of have to work at it in the same way that like Apple works with requirements. They don't necessarily only take the customer's recommendations when they're making a new product. They say, well, what do we know the customer's trying to do, and what are the questions the customer hasn't asked themselves yet, but that we can use our insight to try to go and figure out how to make a better product. So no, not every environment should be in the cloud. A lot of environments should be in the cloud, and a lot of environments should be in Adobe's new cloud service. There are an increasing number of use cases that the cloud service is great for, this new cloud service, and I'd love to go into tons more detail on that subject, but yeah, they've got a lot of engineering talent that's working really hard at trying to make it cover more use cases, but even so, there's going to be cases that where you've got it's just not right from a requirement standpoint, but maybe it's not right from a people standpoint, and I think that's kind of what we wanted to dive into, because what is right for where you're going to stick your infrastructure that is the face of your entire company. Well, in some cases it's the face, in some cases it's not. In some cases the main thing that AEM is driving is just a big enterprise digital asset management repository, which fine, it's a tool for the company. So but where you're going to stick that and what you're going to do with it really comes down to not only who do you have, but who are you willing to go through the work of acquiring. Because this space of designing and programming and developing around marketing sites like this is a tough space to recruit for, and especially in the Adobe space, where it's not like make it a WordPress site where anybody can download it for free and work on it for free and get good at it, and they can take a boot camp course at their local community college or something like that, and next thing you know, they're a good developer and now they're in the workforce. It's not the same with AEM, where you've got you got to be in to be in. You got to know a guy.
And I think touching on that point as well, as that was something that was brought up recently, and it is very, very difficult to get access. And like you said, you've got to be in to be in that circle to get access. Something that I know from experience is going back to Sitecore days, where I solely recruit for Adobe now, but back in the day I focused on the Sitecore market as well. And something that was great from them that they actually stopped doing was they gave ultimately anyone the access to it. They were able to download that, have a really good go on that, build up the skills, and it made it really accessible for companies to get into them in terms of hiring people. And you're absolutely right in terms of that's not available in the Adobe world. And if you are getting into it, it's not cheap either. And that's not, I suppose, ultimately a huge issue for a lot of these companies, because the value of that is worth it. But from a development standpoint, it is certainly difficult to recruit people. And I think, I suppose, going on to your point of the difficulty around that, there are obviously different options that a company would have. I suppose, are you able to say from your experience different ways that a company do go about rather staffing or working on an AEM project?
Well, and it really depends too on who do you. So it depends on a lot of things. Like, do you have a going concern right now that you've got some guys already, and especially if you've got guys that are already good, they're good teachers, that wouldn't mind taking somebody under their wing and showing them the ropes and so forth. Like my first exposure to AEM was back when it's still called CQ, And I'd been a sysadmin for years, and I'd never touched it before. I'd worked with other CMSs before. And the guy hiring me is like, all right, so you ever heard of Day Communicate? I'm like, nah, no, I haven't. He's like, don't worry about it. Nobody has. I mean, now that it's owned by Adobe, then many more people have heard of it,
Yeah.
if not touched it. But it wasn't a big deal. It's like the fact that I already knew how to run a load balancer, and knew how to get my way around a Linux server, and knew how to fix things when there's smoke coming out the back of it. Then at least I was useful, and I could just learn the rest of it. And it's similar for a lot of things on AEM too. Like a few years back, I worked for Rackspace. Rackspace is an amazing company that has whatever they got. A room, I mean, it's not now due to COVID, but at the time we had a room with like 1,000 sysadmins in it. They'd taken over an old department store, an old Macy's, and there's 1,000 sysadmins sitting in a Macy's. It's like, it's amazing. You want to know about, this or this or this technology, you just walk over and tap somebody in the shoulder and say hi. So it was a great environment to be able to learn new stuff. So you didn't necessarily need to recruit somebody who knew everything, as long as you had a good learner. But you take another company that they've got a mission critical AEM environment that they need to get live. You need to bring in and it's supposed to be hosted in house. Let's say it's a bank, and it needs to all be hosted in house. Okay, you need an architect and some sysadmins and a lead developer and a lead and a lead backend developer or architect who knows what they're talking about and has done. And this is not their first rodeo. You would need those guys to be able to mentor the rest of your team, and you couldn't just say, well, I'm going to have one dude, and then I'm going to have, and then the rest of it's going to be, a vendor or Adobe. It's going to be a failed deployment. That's going to be a painful deployment. And there's going to be a lot of bad decisions. There's going to be a lot of, painted yourself into a corner moments.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be rough. And so compositing that team based on your strategy and talking to somebody first about what you think your strategy is, and then figuring out how you're going to composite your team. It's important.
Yeah. And I think because that's partly, I suppose, what our second question would be how that kind of changes based on your infrastructure strategy. But before we get on to that, I think something I probably interrupted before going on to the site call topic, but around AEM as a cloud service, I think I know that ultimately with core component and what Adobe is pitching this as, ultimately it's from an outside standpoint, and for the record, I'm not technical. I think a lot of people will realize that anyway, knowing me. I'm not a developer, but in terms of how they are pitching it, it's obviously a lot easier to implement as a business. Do you think from a technical standpoint, AEM as a cloud service is making that any easier? Or if you're a company, if you have developers, is it making it any easier for them? Because I think what I'm trying to get at is, from the outside, it could look like AEM as a cloud service is going to be a lot easier to initially implement. So is there really going to be as much need for the developers as we move towards that?
So the cloud service hasn't at all really diminished the need for an experienced AEM developer. In fact, I think it's made it more critical, because in a lot of cases you've got certain ways of going about things that maybe previously would have been handled with hardware that are now going to get handled with integrations and service calls. You've got things where you've got a lot more things that are going to need to talk to each other outside of your walls. You're going to need people who have a clue about how to secure that, how to execute it, how to do things, how to measure it performance-wise, how to test it. So having good AEM developers has never been really more important in that case. And the class of other supporting characters that you need is also it's similar but different, because in some cases you're offloading some of the workload onto Adobe, some of the heavy lifting. Like as an example, previously, so you've got in AEM, you've got a couple different tiers of application server that all do a job. One of those jobs is the author environment, which handles things like digital asset management, transcoding of inbound files. It handles, it's where people author their pages. It's where they run their workflows to say whether it should be published and things like that. So this author environment is challenging from an infrastructure perspective. It is one of these ones that's never scaled horizontally very well. And in order to scale it horizontally, the only way you could do it was to set up a whole MongoDB cluster behind it and have it all talk to it. So in order, like, let's say you're a big company, let's say you're a, something the size of Ford or Mercedes-Benz or General Motors or something like that, right? In order, and let's say you've got 500 to 1,000 concurrent people who may use this thing to upload assets or to author pages. That's a lot of workload. That's all not going to fit on one computer. So in order to do that, you're going to need to go and install it. But you can't just run AEM. At that point, you need really good cloud architects, really good system guys, and somebody who's a team of guys who are going to run that MongoDB cluster. It's never one guy that you can hire. It's always more than one guy, because that guy is going to get tired sometimes. He may want to take a day with his family, kind of a thing. So you can't just hire one guy. Like, sorry, man, you've got the pager of doom for the next month. And yes, I've been that guy before, and it's really uncomfortable. So there ends up being a big team there. So some of that gets offloaded to Adobe. It's not free, obviously. They're not giving any of it for free. So it's not like you don't have to. It would be a lie to say it gets done by another company, so you don't have to pay for it. You're totally paying for it. You're absolutely paying for it. But it's something that you don't need to hire for.
Yeah.
So that's where it comes full circle back to personnel, because let's say you've got, let's say for other applications, because there's never, AEM is not ever the only enterprise application here, because the target audience is all your big companies, your big, your F500 type companies. So these are companies that have lots of applications. They have lots of databases and CRMs, and they've got thises and that's, and the thing that manages the pipeline for the factory floor and all that other kind of stuff. They've got gear everywhere. So they never don't have an IT department. So you may already have people who do all these things. Maybe you've already got a cloud center of excellence that is already super good at Azure or super good at AWS or both. Maybe you've already got a whole core of Java developers, and you got a bunch of sysadmins, and maybe a bunch of them have touched AEM. So to say, hey, you don't need to have sysadmins for this anymore. Well, those guys aren't going to get fired, because they have a million other jobs that they're already spread, they're buttered thin as they can be buttered on other stuff. So it's not like you can fire them and pocket the change or something like that. Because now you're going to pay for them, plus you're paying for the sysadmins at Adobe to do their thing, right? So there's not really a cost play in that case. Conversely, if let's say you're a net new company, let's say you're an agency and you got contracted to move a web property from Drupal to AEM. It's a net new AEM. There's nobody there who runs AEM. There's no sysadmins. Maybe there's a guy who's the sysadmin guy who runs the backups and whatever, and that's what he does. Right. That is one of these ones that's like a, made in heaven type of a proposition for the cloud services. You go, oh, good. Well, I just got to get the developers and get somebody who's going to be kind of my most technical ops oriented guy, because there's always going to be ops. There's never, you can't just say, oh, good, you're handling the ops, I don't need to think about ops, because that's never the case, right? Because the site is always running, and Adobe is going to be there, or whoever your partner is. Because here's the other thing too, is that Adobe partners, your ICF Next, Perficient, Rackspace, Bounteous, all these guys, right? They all have managed hosting as well, and they're good at it, and there's cases for them too, and so. And there's always something for them to do, because once you take your website live, the only people who really, really, really know what it means to be online, green, up and to the left, up and to the right kind of a thing, it's all working well. The only people who really know that are the product guys of that site. Like, yes, the search has to be performing well. I need to be able to get my contact forms in this long. This such and such workflow has to happen within, such and such, time frame or less, or the SLA is broken. Like they know all this stuff. They know what to watch out for. The hosting company isn't necessarily, unless you got a really super good one, they're not necessarily watching all those metrics. So you have to have somebody who's designing the dashboards. They're good with Splunk, and they can go in there and, log aggregation, Elasticsearch, whatever the heck they're doing, and come up with some crazy dashboards. They're application performance monitoring guys. They're the guys who design your pipeline to make sure stuff gets deployed and doesn't take forever. You don't have to have 25 people working all weekend on a deployment every weekend, kind of a thing. There's always stuff like that to do. So with any of these conversations, there's when you're saying, good, where should I've got this project, where should I stick it? That's never just like a canned response that you can offer to that, ever, even if you're the one that sells it. Especially if you're the one that sells it, because nobody's going to trust you afterwards if you just give them a canned response. And that is the thing, is that each one of these have their own specific requirements, and you got to be thinking on your feet with who do you have, who do you need to hire, because you know that from trying to hire people. Like somebody you put at a rec for senior AEM forms developer, that's gonna be a bit, right?
We are in high demand for forms developers, as you can imagine, at the moment, and it's a tough one. And I think it's, as you mentioned, it's very difficult for any company. And I suppose, touching on, before I move on from that, it sounds very much that if you are ultimately a company that's getting into the Adobe world without much going on, AEM as a cloud service is going to be, it's almost making it a lot more accessible to companies to get into it.
That was that was absolutely the aim, and that's what they're running hard to try to do. And again, as there's growing pains with it, but at the same time, they've got a lot of engineering talent that's working on, a lot of guys who are not dumb, who are working on this. And
I think you made I think it was a comment in your last video. Was it something like 700 engineers that were?
It's a few hundred. Who knows what the number is right now? But it
was a lot.
But these are talented guys that are spanning all kinds of different things. Like, as an example of problems that they are midst solving, forms is one of those things. Forms is an age-old product. I think it was first released just before the War of 1812.
Was it live cycle before?
It was, and so it's this ball of 32-bit libraries that you got to install in the Linux system, plus a bunch of stuff that runs inside of AEM, plus some others. It makes you cringe anytime you look at it. It's totally not cloud ready, and they have to just try to. It doesn't scale. You have to purchase it based on CPUs, like an old 1984 Oracle style license. And it's so they have to figure out how to cloudify that, kind of like they did with assets, which solved this big problem we've always had, which is companies like, you got an Under Armour sized company that has mega assets everywhere, right? Just sales assets, and you got a whole set of new shoes and everything, that like just tons of assets. You can't put all that through a single computer and expect it to transcode all the videos that you've got and all that. It just doesn't work like that. So cloudifying that and making microservices that run all that is amazing. It's transformative. But again, this is going to be a process of transforming a lot of this, and we're all going to have to. It's just going to be, right now is one of these most critical times of where there's the hope of much change is on the horizon always, and you just need to know what is available now that solves our problems now. So
and I don't want to get too much into covering off kind of the video that you did before. So I'll put the link to that. You cover a lot of interesting things around issues, and a really great topic about what a lot of people don't know, that you don't have to be all in, which was something really interesting that you covered. I'll leave that to your other video before to kind of not cover that off. But yeah, I suppose building around a team, and it's very similar to ultimately the original question. that we've mentioned the Adobe partner programs. There's amazing partners out there that can support you. Adobe with AEM as a cloud service ultimately are getting into the implementation game, are really in that space as well now, even though they've always been somewhat involved with that side. But as a team, if you are a company, is there kind of a process that you would go through as someone that sits on the partner side yourself, where you would have that conversation if a partner's right, or is this something that they need to build internally? Is there kind of a different scenario for both?
Yeah, I don't know. So there's that's a tough one. That's a tough one because I've seen conversations go both ways, where you are where you're a company coming to the table with a very known set of requirements and a very known set of needs of what you're looking for in implementation help. Like you just want some staff. Like you know it's going to take forever with the 2 devs you've got, so you just need a couple more, and they're just going to plug in staff log style, and they're just going to roll with you. Or do you really need somebody who's gonna bring in people as needed to help you out with this? Because and I get this all the time too with just being out there on the internet. I get just bombarded with recruitment things, and this is and that's. But a lot of times it's a problem for the recruiters even, because they don't even, it's not even necessarily clear what are even the difference between any of these jobs. What do they even do? And I feel like I need to like that's the training course I gotta come up with. I've been working on a book for AEM. I'm like, you know what? Actually, no, I should switch gears and just make a book of like, who are the people in AEM world?
I think that's
because your average team of people that I work with as an individual. Because see, I've been focused on infrastructure for forever, and so I've been that's been my gig is infrastructure, DevOps, and pipelines, and all that kind of stuff, and cloud stuff, and that whole end of it. And I get my certifications, and I'm an AEM architect, and suddenly I have this AEM architect title. AEM architect also means like 3 other things that I don't do at all. And so a lot of guys also who have that title don't know a single thing about hardware or gear or traffic or measuring or infrastructure or anything, but they're wizards in terms of back-end development. And so that's where you have a guy, because you have to have somebody who's going to, after the designer hands you the thing, you've got your front-end developers who they're super good with they're doing, React or Angular or something like that. And they know whatever the current frameworks are, because they changed. I think it's on a 7-day cadence that all the frameworks change and you need to do something. So you got that. You have those set of guys who are the front end guys. It's been a while since I've been out of that game, and like I said, if you've been out of that game for more than a week, then you're toast. So I've been out of that game for 15 years. But then you got your back end guys, and the back end guys, there's that just further stratifies what you need to be good at, because then you've got guys who are just good Java developers. You've got guys who are good AEM backend developers who can create complicated workflows, and AEM forms is another example. Or they're good with other integrations, because things like most of the time with AEM, you've got custom search as an example. Maybe you've got a requirement that needs to include internal business stuff plus external stuff. AEM's out of the box search totally doesn't do this. You got to use Senequa or Elasticsearch or Solar or something. So you got to get somebody who's good with that, or some crazy Mongo thing. Or you've got communities in there, user-generated content that you're needing to handle, which is its own ball of wax. I just wrote something on that. So you have that, but then you have other architects who are more on the information architecture end of things. Especially important when you're designing a DAM solution, digital asset management, where you've got, so somebody comes to the table and says, okay, we've got 2.3 million products, each of which 203 million SKUs, each of which may have 5 images or up to 12, PDF docs, executable files that may be associated with each, and some of them have videos. And then I got to be able to find any of it, and some of them are private, and some of them need to be able to be accessed by agencies.
Yeah.
And you have to have somebody who can figure that out in a way that makes sense now and will continue to make sense in 3 years, because you don't want to have to pay an implementation partner again, next year to re-architect your dam again.
Yeah.
So, so you have that. Then you have your sysadmin guys, you have DevOps guys, you have your guys who are good at making a pipeline. You have QA engineers, which is not just clickety click click, let me test it. That's not what you do anymore. You have guys who are actual developers who can design test strategies against this that can automatically be executed by either Adobe's gear or your own gear. You've got whoever's going to be on call is really going to depend on what have you deployed. Then you've got whatever your cloud architects, all that kind of stuff. So never mind, we haven't gotten into things like commerce, which is very commonly integrated with AEM. So you have to have your Magento guy, or your Hybris team who's going to be working on this, so and then all the other connected Adobe Experience branded stuff, like you've got your Adobe Experience Platform or Target or any of these kind of things. They all require experts. So all I'm saying is that you've got your work cut out for you, man. I'm glad I don't have to do all that, because I just have to beat my head against the desk and make stuff work. So
yeah, I actually had a really interesting conversation with it earlier on today, where I'm a big golf guy. I think if anyone knows me personally, I'm a big golfer. He put it into a metaphor that worked really well for me. He was in a great role at the moment. If he's listening, he'll know who he is from this reference. He said the role that he does, ultimately, a lot of the people in this industry, we're a 6 iron, and we are ideal if you need a 6 iron. And if you need something different, I'm not going to be able to do that. And I think it referenced really well that we come across, and you will come across as well, but from a candidate perspective in this market is where we try and put ourselves a lot of the time. That's why we only specialize in Adobe and only do that. I think recruitment's complicated enough without trying to do millions of different things. And the same as how an Adobe partner is really the go-to for me, because they've already got that team built, and they know how everything works together, and they're great at working together. I think from the recruitment side, we come across a lot of architects that now, if you reach out for an AEM architect, and some recruiters will complain about this, you immediately get a response back: can you send me the job? Like, can you tell me what the role is?
Right.
And it's challenging, because there's a lot of people that see AEM and can spell AEM and know that AEM, they need an architect. And it's very challenging to, like you said, find the right person and the right sort of 6 iron for that, and exactly the right tool for that. Because there's so many different specializations in that space. But yeah, I think from our side, it is very challenging. There's obviously a lot, and not a lot of, I suppose, a lot of demand and not a lot of supply. And there's various different people that want to get into the game. Everyone's trying to get onto the Adobe ship, and work with AEM, be a partner and implement in that space. And it's ultimately just not that easy. So a lot of the people that, and we spoke about this before, we spoke about someone that I'd spoken earlier in the week, and you'd actually had a conversation as well. And we're a very tight-knit community, and you can almost know who you need in the role. And you could probably list off a number of names. And we have companies that we'll have that conversation with. I'll be like, oh, well, I know a number of people that can do this. So now that we know ultimately who the right people are, which is a challenge in itself, as you've just said, there's so many different roles. And I think that would be a really great kind of video to cover, just the roles within the AEM stack and what people do. But not only understanding that is difficult enough, knowing the people that can then go and do that and actually make it attractive for them to make the move. Because really a lot of, and you will know this, a lot of what we do is very similar from company to company. As a whole, there's obviously better environments, there's better cultures to do this, but the role at a certain level is an AEM role the board, and that really changes a lot. And as AEM as a cloud service comes in, obviously there will be changes, and I think people getting into that, and I think it was Eric that mentioned it on your previous video, there needs to be companies really supporting developers in that space.
Yep.
But again, going to a point that you mentioned earlier about it's really not that easy to get into Adobe right now. So I think, and I know we mentioned them before, and they won't mind me mentioning this. In fact, they'll probably cheer me for it. Bounteous is someone that I know is doing a great job in terms of bringing people in and growing them. And I think companies have got to do that. From our side, we can go and find and recruit for people and understand that as best as we can. But ultimately, we're in a tight market. There's only a limited amount of people. It's only going to get harder as the demand grows, as Adobe grows. And yeah, it's an interesting one from a recruitment side. And yeah, we love what we do. It's certainly not a challenge. If it was easy, there wouldn't be a space for us with kind of everything. But yeah, I think it's only going to get harder as this matures.
Yeah. Well, it's just going to make it more important for the rest of us who've been in the game for a little bit to get off our duffers and start cutting some more training videos for people, because I think in a lot of cases, I've told this to recruiting managers that I've had working for me to try to fill roles. I'm like, you know what, just because recruiting somebody who's already experienced with some of these things is hard. But what is seemingly easier, though more difficult from a people perspective, is because a lot of times I don't necessarily, like when I had a support team working for me, and there's a bunch of guys who are supposed to support AEM. I don't necessarily need you to hire me a guy who already knows everything about supporting AEM. But from an ops guy, there's a certain ops viewpoint of like you have to be on it when it comes to keeping something online, and you have to be passionate about that, and you have to be passionate about all the minutia that goes into that, and all the forethought that goes into that, and all the questions and wanting to know more and all that kind of stuff. You don't necessarily need to know AEM as long as you've got that operational viewpoint of, good, I'm going to make this thing purr like a kitten. It's just going to go. And then if I can take that guy who maybe all he knows is WordPress or just basic Linux server stuff, good. I'll teach you AEM. If you want to make this stuff hum, I'll teach you AEM, and then we'll roll, sort of a thing. I think it's very similar for developers also. Like, you get somebody who's a passionate developer, teach them the ins and outs of AEM, but as long as he's got great communication, willing to work with a team, and willing to learn, because you're always going to be learning. I mean, look at what happened. AEM as a cloud service, that's only a year old, and it's completely fundamentally changed our entire lives. So you're going to be learning all the time, regardless.
Yeah, I suppose from that side, I think as the move, and again, I'm not technical, so you may have to fill in on a couple of gaps here, but I think going back to the 6.4 was where we really saw a real kind of structure side of it, where things had to be done a certain way, and that's obviously moving in and making it a lot easier to go into AEM as a cloud service. That I suppose it needs to be a certain way so that can work. Right. Do you think, and this may well be shooting myself in the foot as an Adobe specialized recruiter, but do you think maybe 5 years down the line, and I don't want to use the word standardized in terms of the development, because it's not at all, but there is seemingly a more formatted way of doing things, the way Adobe wants that. Do you think it's really going to become easier to recruit people because there's, I don't want to say one way of doing things, but I suppose I am going down that route a little bit.
So to an extent, but at the same time, I think you're going to have more. There's going to be more of the Nile Delta action of different things that you're going to end up doing. As an example, so this is one thing, and just user-generated content. So this is something that is currently not handled with AEM as a cloud service. And so you're moving there, and let's say you've got a big bunch of comments and stuff that you need to go and, you know, forums and, you know, a notification bell that's got to be on your site. Okay, now you're going to need to figure out something all on your own to make that run.
Yeah.
You're going to be talking to an external service. You're going to be making it yourself. You're going to be, so all of a sudden you've got a requirement that needs a solution. And if the solution isn't provided in a standardized way by the vendor, you're making it. And so, and there's going to be more cases like this as time goes on, because AEM is not going to get more standardized in terms of the cases that it caters to.
Yeah.
Adobe is constantly looking for, like, commerce wasn't a big part of the AEM use case before, and now it is. And now you have these blended content and sales sites. I mean, heck, look at somebody like Tesla. You know what I mean? It was unheard of before to actually purchase a freaking car on your website, and now you do. You know what I mean? So this is going to be something. I mean, there's laws against this in the U.S., but who knows what it's going to be like the rest of the world. You know, soon you're going to have whatever, you know, Opel or Citroen or something like that. It's like, good, let me buy me a car on the site that I just, you know. So you're going to have these, you know, experiences that are going to be these unified experiences that also have all these different touch points. And who knows what the next thing is going to be besides just mobile too. All this AR stuff, and you're going to be serving your content thing is going to be serving up your silly little glasses that have the, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So there's
was it the Google Lens?
Yeah.
Way beyond its time.
Oh yeah. So there's going to be all kinds of stuff to do, and so I think that it may. Hopefully it's going to get easier to get people into the Adobe world.
Yeah.
And we'll all do our part to try to make that be the case. But yeah, it's an exciting time to be alive.
Yeah, 100%. And I certainly feel there is, and I know you're amazing at it, especially from the content that you put out there as well. I certainly feel there's a huge piece of passing the torch. The Adobe world is incredible at that. I think there's a lot of great people out there that put a lot of amazing content out there. I suppose the summit, for a lot of reasons, is fantastic. It's a lot, and I think there's going to be a lot this year, especially when you're at home, actually being able to consume that. But yeah, I think that's a really great topic to both touch on and end on as well, in terms of that it's great to get into. I suppose as a finalized thing to kind of leave it on, and this was going back some time that I think it was right as they announced that they were going AEM as a cloud service. So I made a very short post, and I will not be posting directly because who knows what my writing was like back then. I can remember one thing I sort of wanted to touch on, that was that I said my belief is that the way Adobe's going is that there will be ultimately teams will be smaller and just a lot more specialized. I don't think they will continue to grow outwards. I think it's going to become, you're going to become very heavily specialized in certain areas. And I think that probably goes down a little bit of what we talked about, and would be a good one to lead into about the actual job roles in AEM. Because certifications kill a lot when they're looking for jobs. Like you said, the AEM architect certification. As soon as you've got that on your profile, you are getting hit with every advert.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. So no, I actually really appreciate your time. Is there anything else I suppose you would want to add initially? I know we'll open this up to questions when we post this out. I'm sure there'll be a request for other things to be answered. But
no, I think we basically have completely sold ourselves, and now we've signed it in blood that we need to do this next video on AEM roles.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, maybe we can bring in a developer or a product guy or something like that to weigh in also, because
we will, for each role we'll find a different person for what they do, and we'll get them involved. Awesome. Well, no, look, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time. We will speak again in terms of this, and no doubt do another video.
Sounds good, man. All right, good talking.
Awesome.